Welcome to the Pigskin Party Podcast, the only podcast that combines real NFL analysis with a splash of pop culture and a dash of the random. Let's get this Pigskin Party started with your hosts, Brian McFadden, Will Southard, and Tommy Yu.
Welcome everybody to the PPP presented by Legit Football. My name is Brian. Please, as always, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening or watching this, and tell a friend so we can grow this Pigskin Party. We are once again without the full crew in more ways than one. So our producer Anthony is not on, so I'm going to try to do the production and probably fail miserably. One of our co-hosts, Tommy, had a personal thing come up last second, so he won't be on. So Will, it's me and you. Are you ready to do this? Just the pair of us.
It's like old times, buddy. It's old times.
That's right.
I'm gonna have to actually bring content. I don't like this.
There's too much pressure on you when it's just me and you.
There's a lot.
Yeah, even though the show started this way, there was no producer when we first started. There was no third co-host. Somehow we made it to this point okay, so I'd like to think we can figure it out, or no? Are we too dependent on the other two at this point?
It's like humble beginnings to humble current state. We've come a long way.
Well, here's some good news. We are basically just over a week when this drops on Wednesday from actual meaningful football. Does that get you hyped at all? It gets me hyped.
It's kind of like the entire time, like for the majority of the time we have done this show, that's an NFL podcast. It hasn't been during when NFL is happening. So yeah, I mean, like it'll be fun to actually talk about the thing that we talk about while it's happening.
Yeah, if you think about it, we hired Anthony in like January. Tommy's been on for a few months, so he joined us in the off season. In the middle of the off season. So who knows how maybe this show was built for the off season, and we'll just crash and burn in week one. But we're here now, and we're going to keep on rolling. So we have a couple of awesome repeat champion guests. One who was on like 2 weeks ago, but he was great to kind of pop in last second. But first, we're going to bring in Will McFadden for the second time with still, and I don't think it'll ever be topped, the greatest name of any guest that has come on this show as a combination of both my name and Will name. Will McFadden, who is a writer for the Falcoholic, host of the Bleav in Falcons podcast, a former reporter for the Falcons themselves. Will, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Brian. Happy to be here. I guess I got to thank my parents for the greatest name honors that they could bestow upon me. But like you guys, I'm really excited to actually have the season be right around the corner. We actually have things to talk about, and I can't wait to get into all of that with you guys.
Yeah, if we can stop the speculating and somebody talked about a trade once upon a time, let's do 3 shows about it and actually say, hey, here's football, we could talk about it. Awesome to have you back, and yes, we will also thank your parents for the great name.
Maybe one day we'll answer the question about should Kyle Pitts have gone as high as he did. Who knows? We're about to find out.
We will actually find out.
David flinched a skeptical eyebrow. I just saw it.
So, yeah, with that cue, let's bring in our second guest. He was here what feels like yesterday, breaking down the Bucs for our Bucs Deep Dive. David Harrison, who is a writer for Bucs Nation, co-host of Locked On Bucs, and even though it's not relevant today, co-host of the Washington football team, Locked On. I forget what your guys are actually calling it. David, team. Welcome back to the PPP.
I appreciate it, guys. I don't have the name that Will has, but I'll try to bring at least a little bit of content.
You can rest assured there's no Arnold Schwarzenegger movies that we're going to talk about this week. This is the main NFL episode. We are just talking football. So obviously, we've done 7 divisions. The regular season is just over a week away. We saved, unlike the Team Deep Dive, we were not able to save that for the last with the Bucs. We saved the Super Bowl champion Bucs division, the NFC South, for last. So this is our last division preview leading right up to the regular season. We got a Falcons guy on. We got a Bucs guy on. I will say quickly, we did have Maddie Hudak, who is a writer for Saints Wire. She's a co-host for ESPN NOLA, was scheduled to come back on also for the second time. She's in New Orleans. She's dealing with, obviously, the Hurricane Ida that's hitting there now. So our thoughts are with her and everyone in New Orleans. So I at least wanted to mention that right off the bat. Maddie, I'm sure you're not listening to this because I wouldn't expect you to. But if you are, we're thinking of you. We hope you are okay. All right, so we're going to preview the NFC South. But we do have a couple of, I think, important news items that we want to get into before we actually break down the Super Bowl champion division. And that is I feel like for the most part this preseason, there weren't a lot of those major injuries. Like we had Carl Lawson, that was kind of the big one so far. And some of the other injuries like Cam Akers actually happened prior to the preseason, but we didn't have a lot of these. I felt like there was no preseason last year, but I felt like there was a ton of bad injuries right in the first few weeks, but we made it fairly unscathed. And then the Ravens, in their quest to win 20 straight preseason games, which is something we haven't talked about much, but that's a whole nother topic, was playing starting running back JK Dobbins, tore his ACL on the first drive. It was a screen pass, and I was actually watching that game, and it just looked bad. He is out for the season. So we'll start with you on this, Will. From a fantasy perspective, was J.K. Dobbins someone you were kind of like targeting this season?
Yeah, I mean, him. Okay.
Which one?
There's two Wills. There's two Wills.
Specify.
Wow, we tripped right into that on the very first question.
Really did.
I will
we
defer to the smarter one. Go.
Okay, Will McFadden with the awesome last name. Let's start with you.
Okay. I think he was definitely in line for a big season. I think that Baltimore was going to rely on him a lot this year. We know about Baltimore's kind of issues really finding consistency in their passing game. I think that they want to be explosive, and I think they can be at times. It's just not a part of their offense that they can really fall back on when they need to, like some other teams in the AFC. So I think that they were going to, as they rightfully should, build around Lamar again. Greg Roman designs a run scheme to really benefit all the pieces there. And I think them moving on from Mark Ingram showed the faith that they had in J.K. Dobbins to really kind of step up and be that. He's more dynamic than Mark Ingram was, much younger, obviously, but still can kind of fill all three downs for them. He's a good pass catcher. So I think he was kind of on the verge of maybe a breakout season, maybe just a tick below that, but certainly a very good season for a team that I think a lot of people have high expectations for. And this is a real shame for Baltimore. I mean, I trust this coaching staff, this organization, to figure out a way to kind of get through this, because I think they're a good organization. But I mean, outside of losing Lamar, it's tough to think of another player that may have kind of crippled what this offense wanted to do.
David, the next up in the rotation is Gus Edwards. Do you think there's a huge drop-off after Dobbins, or he's actually had I was looking up some stats, and as far as PFF grades, he actually had a really good rushing grade in the opportunities he's had. How do you feel Gus Edwards fits in, taking over for Dobbins?
Yeah, I mean, Gus isn't, he's not a terrible running back in his own right, but he's not as versatile, he's not as dynamic as what J.K. Dobbins was supposed to be and what he brought to the offense. And there's been a lot of conversation over whether or not Lamar Jackson, once he kind of shook off the whole can he or can he not be an NFL quarterback conversation, then the problem was, okay, well, once teams key into him and that passing game prevent him from being able to do some of the things that he can do with his legs, is there another gear that this Baltimore offense can bring to the field to make defenses worried and to actually put some fear into the opposing side of the ball, other than we just understand we're probably going to be in a shootout and it's going to be the first team to 30 that wins these games. And that's what J.K. Dobbins really brought to the field, is it gave them the opportunity in Baltimore that you could put up some points pretty quickly with that offense and with a quarterback that is dynamic as Lamar Jackson. But when you need to grind the clock down, when you need to kind of extend, you don't want to take a 4-minute drive and then give the opponent the ball back with 1:45 seconds left on the clock. If you get the ball with 4 minutes left in a game or in a half and score at the 30-second mark, the 45-second mark, that's what you want to do. That's what J.K. Dobbins does for your offense. Gus Edwards is still a serviceable running back, but he's not near as versatile or as dynamic as J.K. is. And this was honestly supposed to be a year that J.K. Dobbins took a really big step towards being one of the best running backs in the NFL. That's really what they're losing out on, is that advantage, that development from J.K. And it sucks for the team, but specifically for J.K. Dobbins himself.
But I mean, from a fantasy perspective, right? I mean, I think the only thing that this can be is getting back to the Lamar Jackson that we had like 2 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Because last year that kind of they shifted to be a more balanced team, which was awful for. I mean, Lamar wasn't awful in fantasy, but he wasn't what he was, right? And so their running back squad is really, really thin now. They got Bateman, so you would hope anyway.
Bateman's injured. He's out, 4 to 6 weeks at this point?
Yeah, but I'm just saying in general. Right? Yeah. They're gonna have to do something.
Well,
They're
a
not gonna have JK
lot
the
of
whole
their
year.
receivers are kind of hurt at this point right now as well, which is it's going to be on Lamar.
Watkins.
But David, to your point about the 4-minute offense thing, I think that this Also, when you're a run-oriented offense, what are you usually missing? Those big, explosive chunk plays. Lamar can get you those. So could JK Dobbins. They don't have any other runner on this roster that can break off a 45-yard run and flip the field. So now it's just even more on Lamar's shoulders.
David, this is a running back friendly offense. Do you feel that putting in somebody like Gus Edwards, who is a significant step down, do you think there's any hope of them being able to keep up the efficiency? Maybe not as much as a pass catcher and maybe not as much as the chunk plays, but do you think there's some hope for Edwards in there?
I mean, you never want to say never, you know what I mean? And a guy who comes with a chip on his shoulder, for a lot of people not expecting a lot of things, he's going to hear, a lot of the murmurs. He's going to read a lot of the clippings. And, I know a lot of guys like to say that they don't read their press clippings. And Will, you can attest to this as much as anybody else. Like, they know what's being said about them. They hear it. Even guys who aren't on Twitter know what's being said on Twitter, whether it's them directly or somebody kind of telling them or showing them what's happening. It's just one of those environments. So Gus is hearing the comments, and he's hearing, he's hearing it, he's reading it, and that's a huge motivator for a lot of guys, and that's something that you send a guy out there out the field with something to prove, and that's a huge factor in these things. So I think, from an operational standpoint, you just never count a guy out. He's an NFL running back for a reason. And something that a lot of football fans don't quite understand is even the worst running back in the NFL is extremely talented as an athlete. It takes a lot of talent to suck in the NFL, is what I like to tell people. And that's absolutely true. So Gus Edwards doesn't suck. He's a very good running back. He's a serviceable guy, like we said. So I wouldn't necessarily count him out. I wouldn't go putting a lot of money on him from a fantasy standpoint. Obviously, this helps him more than anything else. And then Lamar Jackson, I think it actually, in some facets, it actually helps people who have Lamar Jackson on their fantasy roster, because utilization is a huge part of fantasy football, and Lamar's utilization just went up significantly.
I mean, there's free agent running backs, right? I mean, what are the chances that Todd Gurley or one of the other available, like maybe Carry-On? I don't know. He's pretty bad.
He's been dropped by multiple teams.
I can't say he's better than Gus Edwards, honestly, but I mean, there are others.
They just came out and said that they were not going to sign Gurley.
Le'Veon Bell, right? I mean, there's a
lot
lot
of
of names.
Why is Bell not on the roster at this point? It just makes you wonder.
He's busy playing Call of Duty. The thing is, though, when you think about Gus Edwards, if you think about a guy in the NFL who's supposed to be shifty and fast, and you hear the name Gus Edwards, just doesn't fit, right? Like,
it doesn't inspire confidence.
Like a plotty, like he's good for like 4 yards kind of guy. I
do this too during draft season. I'll sit and look at somebody, and it's like Michael Carter. Yeah, I could see that being a good running back. Like I could just see ESPN being like Michael Carter, 200 yard, like just it fits, right? But yeah, Gus Edwards, it's a bowling ball.
Saquon Barkley, right? Like obviously explosive. Gus Edwards. Anyway, all right, moving on.
So there was one other injury I mentioned in the preseason. There's no easy way to transition away from that talk, so I'm just going to run ramshot right to the next topic. And that was, we mentioned that Carl Lawson, who was the big free agent acquisition for the Jets, tore his Achilles and is out for the season. So what do you do when you lose one Lawson? You bring on another. So the Jets acquired edge rusher Shaq Lawson, who played with the Dolphins last year before being traded to the Texans. Will end up not playing a single down in the regular season for the Texans, has now been traded to the Jets for a 2022 6th-round pick. Will Southard, how do you like that? We'll start with you on this one. I mean, this seems like kind of a no-brainer pick. My question is more like, what are the Texans doing? Are they acquiring all these like mid-tier veterans so that they can trade them for some late-round picks? Is there any strategy here?
Do the Texans ever have a strategy? Like, I saw one thing that said the other day that said, how like this whole Deshaun Watson news, as you know, with the Dolphins, the rumors, and they said the Texans are hunting for like 3 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. And the take it was by some reporter who was very witty. He said that the only team, like the Texans think that they can get that from Deshaun Watson. They obviously can't. Because the only team that would fall for that trade and give up 3 first-round picks and 2 seconds for Deshaun Watson would be the Texans.
The Texans
right?
themselves.
So who knows what that organization does, man? I don't know. Are they rebuilding? I'm not really sure. And as for the Jets, I don't know what to expect from the Jets in that defense. You got to think that Saul and that organization knows what holes they need to shore up. So, I mean, I don't have a strong opinion on the Jets either way. maybe it makes sense. It's kind of weird that you trade a guy that hasn't even played a down for you, but I can't imagine that he's too sad to be out of Texas.
David, how do you feel? Shaq Lawson actually was fairly consistent and a good producer for the Dolphins last year, formerly of the Bills, high round draft pick. How do you feel about this move?
I mean, it's a good move. I think Shaq Lawson still has some untapped potential. I think he's the kind of player that the scheme has got to fit. He's got to have the right players around him. He's kind of like your game managing quarterback. He's not going to be a guy that comes in and makes your defense better by himself, but with the right pieces around him as part of the right system and process, he can be very effective. And I think that's essentially what the team is going to ask him to come and do is kind of stop the bleeding there a little bit and try to bring that defense up a little bit more as they try to support a rookie quarterback. I mean, I don't know what the hopes are around the New York Jets. I'm sure inside the locker room and Coach Saleh, his words are very rah-rah and we're here to win a championship and all that stuff. But I think the reality of it is this team is still a couple years, if not a few years away of really good draft picks and then some free agent signings if they can get some from being real contenders. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with going out there and trying to put the best team on the field you can. So if you get a guy with the upside of a Shaq Lawson for really a draft pick that most oftentimes is not going to make a roster, you're not really putting a whole lot out there at risk, and you're potentially gaining a lot if you can find a diamond in the rough.
That's like Gardner Minshew's price, right? It's basically free.
Well, here's the question to Will McFadden. And by the way, I've determined that Will Southard, since your name in our little studio is Willis, I'm just going to call you Willis because I don't really want to call last names every time. I sound like a teacher, professor or something. So Will, meaning Falcons Will, my question to you is, if Shaq Lawson, who, as David said, still has something left in the tank, could be had for a 6th round pick, why did the Falcons not get him?
I mean, that's a good question. I think that a lot of it probably depends on what are the internal expectations this year. Obviously they're going to say what they need to say, and they're going to say they don't expect to be back in the top 5 again, because what kind of message is that to send to your owner, to send to your fan base, all of that stuff. So I just think that Atlanta's in a weird place right now because they're not financially really out of the woods even this upcoming offseason. So a lot of it, I think, is really just kind of biding their time, getting kind of back on the right side of the ledger to where they can really deploy the strategy that they want to go get the guys they really want. It's a little bit of, save your money. Don't spend on these little, if you're at Chuck E. Cheese, you got all the tickets, save for the $1,000 ticket prize instead of going to get the 200 ticket prize and then the 150 ticket prize. And sure, you get a lot of small little toys, but you don't get the big prize. And I think that's kind of probably what the Falcon strategy would be here. And sure, it's a 6th round pick, but what is taking on Shaq Lawson's contract? What does he really bring to this team? Is he going to turn this team into a contender? No, probably not. But I will say for the Jets, I like that move because their defensive line is really still kind of that strength of their team, and they need to keep that a strength. And I know Jeff Holbrook, their defensive coordinator, the former linebackers coach in Atlanta. There are few coaches that I have as much respect for as Jeff Holbrook. I think he's incredibly smart. He's extremely humble. He really doesn't want the spotlight, doesn't want to take the accolades. He likes to work in the background. He's a quiet guy, but he's responsible for the development of Deion Jones, Foye Oluokun, Michael Walker coming into his 2nd year. I mean, he is a really, really strong coach, and I think that he's going to know the best way to get kind of everything out of whoever is on that defense, because that's the strength of his, is figuring out what players do well and letting them do it.
Well, my reason for that question was twofold. One, because as I really dove into these teams for the NFC South for this preview, the Falcons' lack of a pass rush was just, kind of hitting me in the face. And yep. Two, so I could have some sort of smooth segue into the division preview. So I'm going to jump at that chance now. Let's go ahead and jump into our preview, the final division before the 2021 season, and that is the NFC South. As we have done the previous 7 weeks, we're going to go through each team in the order of their 2020 standings. So we'll start at the top with the Saints, go to the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers, next with the Panthers, and follow up with the Falcons. We'll talk about key losses, key additions, any coaching changes, how that can affect it, key injuries. And then we at the end, we'll break down the teams and we'll each give our prediction for how we feel this division is going to turn out. So once again, shout out to Maddie Hudak. Hope she is doing okay and staying safe in New Orleans. We were ready to have her on to talk about her Saints. We'll just have to do it for her. So the New Orleans Saints, who won the division in 2020, key additions. not much, because similar to the Falcons, except probably worse, they don't have any money to spend. So they did bring on running back Devontae Foreman recently for some running back depth, and tight end Nick Vanette. That's essentially all the additions that they made. There are a lot of key departures, though, that are, I think, going to make a big deal, have a big effect on the team this year. Quarterback Drew Brees obviously retired. Jackrabbit Jenkins, he actually doesn't want to be called Janoris anymore. He's actually legally wants to be Jackrabbit. Not Will McFadden, because that's now how I have to refer to him. Shaking his head. Tight end Jared Cook, defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins, defensive end Trey Hendrickson, wide receiver Emmanuel Sanders. There's a long list here. Linebacker Quan Alexander, cornerback Prince Amukamara, defensive tackle Malcolm Brown, tight end Josh Hill, and quarterback Patrick Robinson, who recently retired. So that's a lot of loss, almost entirely on the defensive side of the ball. Key 2021 draft picks, defensive end Peyton Turner, linebacker Pete Werner, and cornerback Paulson Adebu. They'll really need him to step up. Coaching changes, none. That's in place. Key injuries and suspensions, though. This is really the only of the 4 teams in this division that has this category. Michael Thomas, who decided until right before training camp to have surgery on his ankle, and he is out until it looks like maybe week 7 at the earliest. And defensive tackle David Onyemata, who is suspended 6 games for PEDs. Vegas right now has the win total at 9 for the Saints. I wanted to ask Maddie about the quarterback competition. She was actually Team Taysom Hill. We now know that Jameis has won the starting job. Mr. Willie Southard.
Wait,
I know you have opinions about Jameis, as you call him. How do you feel about Winston winning the starting job?
Was there ever a question, really? I really don't feel like there was, right? Like, Taysom Hill is gadget.
Sean Payton loves Taysom Hill. He really does.
And we had, people on here that say that that's true, and that's why there was more of a controversy than there probably otherwise would have been, right? I mean, but going back real quick to what David, do you say that you have the Saints competing below the Falcons and Panthers, as in coming in last in the division?
I have New Orleans 3rd place. I know we're not at that point of the show yet, but I will.
Okay.
Spoiler alert! I will say that I have the New Orleans Saints.
David, thank you for keeping it on track. Will just tries to, let's
I don't
predictions for the end.
But it's much like entertaining conversation, Brian. We let the snake go where it was.
Which, not for nothing, but that one prediction pretty much tells you the rest of it.
Yeah. Listen. All right. Look, that aside, right? I mean, if there's one thing Jameis Winston is not gonna be, it's boring, right? Like, he's a walking meme.
Agreed.
You see his goofy warm-ups and his everything. Like the NFL is better with Jameis Winston in it. Can we at least agree that that's a thing, right? But I mean, I don't. I think one of the things, I love Alvin Kamara. I think the dude is just ungodly talented. But I think a lot of what opened Alvin Kamara up was the Brees to Thomas connection, right, and a lot of the heavy running. And they just put Alvin Kamara in a position to succeed. I'm not so sure a full season, if they just lean hard on that, if it's going to be the same Alvin Kamara that we've seen, right? And so, as much as on paper they probably could gel some things together, like David said, I think a lot of it hinges on how fast and loose Jameis is with the ball and what kind of success they can have behind that running game.
Will Mack, how are you feeling about the Saints this year? You think your Falcons can
just call him Big Mac.
Jump them? Big Mac? Oh, whatever.
He's like,
Wait, you say Big Mac? Yeah.
Just tell us about the Saints.
Okay. I know all of the focus has been on the offense, obviously, with Drew Brees, like the quarterback turnover. That's where everybody's naturally gonna focus. But I think it's the defense that is the bigger issue for the Saints this year, because as Drew Brees got older, obviously everybody talked about his limitations, what he could, what he couldn't do. But I think Sean Payton did a good enough job to adjust the offense to Drew Brees' limitations, steered it away from the limitations, geared it towards his strengths. And then they relied on the defense a lot. And their defense was really, really good the last 2-3 years. But for kind of the reasons we talked about earlier, a lot of these free agency departures were some of these key role players on the defense, guys like Trey Hendrickson, Jackrabbit Jenkins. Like the depth in the secondary is now taking a hit. And while the Saints do still have kind of like some core guys like a Cam Jordan on the defensive line, a Demario Davis at linebacker, and a Marshawn Lattimore at the third level, I think us in the NFC South, we know Marshawn Lattimore probably hasn't played up to the standard he set when he broke out as a rookie since his rookie season. I mean, he's struggled a little bit over the past few years against
Except
a really
against
good...
Mike Evans. For some reason, he's got Mike Evans' number.
He never plays too well against the Falcons. So I think that there's a lot of volatility with the Saints this year, because if Sean Payton has figured out Jameis and he's brought back parts of the offense that they ran when Jimmy Graham was there, when Marcus Colston was there, when they were more of a vertical passing attack, then if Jameis is on point and is the Jameis we all expected him to be, this team could be right back up there with 12, 13 wins. I mean, if the offense could be that good, but I just think that the defense has taken a big step off, and I don't expect the offense to actually light the world on fire. I expect them to be okay to good sometimes. And with that, I think you're looking at probably 7, 8, 9 wins, which would put them right in the mix where kind of I have the Falcons and the Panthers. So I mean, I think it could shake out any number of ways. But yeah, I'm not too high on the Saints this year.
Yeah, I'm completely with both of you guys, and I was that way. And then I started diving into the depth charts and kind of the more analytical stats, and I'm even more that way now, looking at this thing specifically, as you said, well, because of the defense. I think the offense will put up points. I think there are weeks where Jameis will throw 2 or 3 picks and could be a detriment, but you've still got one of the better offensive lines in the league. You've still got Alvin Kamara. You've got, Marcus Callaway really has come along. He's made some really great highlight-worthy plays and has been a solid receiver in the preseason. So it may not be as good as Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, but you'll have some weapons, and Jameis will throw some touchdowns. But this defense, even on the line, short of Cam Jordan, losing somebody like Malcolm Brown who had snaps, losing David Onyemata for at least the first 6 games, losing Trey Hendrickson on the other side rushing the passer, and then on top of all the losses in the secondary, they haven't done enough, and they haven't been able to afford to replace these guys. So I think that's going to be a big hindrance for them. You've got the Falcons offense, which I think will be great. The Bucs offense is already one of the best in the league. I think the Panthers could even put up some points, with Darnold and a quarterback upgrade in Carolina. So to have what could end up being one of the worst defenses in this division against those offenses, it's going to come back to bite the Saints. Let's move on to the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think it was exactly 2 weeks ago we just had David on doing a deep dive. So we'll try to keep this in reference to the whole division. Key additions, by the way, 8 divisions, 32 teams for the division previews. This was the easiest to put together because they didn't really change much. So it made my job easier. Thank you, Bucs. Running back Gio Bernard, who, according to Will Southard, is probably the greatest key addition for any team in this offseason. And quarterback Antonio Hamilton, formerly of the Chiefs. That's it for the additions. Key departures, offensive tackle Joe Haig, who is now with the Steelers, and safety Andrew Adams. These are not players who were starters, but they are players who played throughout the playoff run and in the Super Bowl as well. Key 2021 draft picks, Joe Tryon, who we talked about when David was on, and he's really had fantastic, I think he had a sack in every preseason game. Or one might have gotten called back. Quarterback Kyle Trask. Yeah. Had a fantastic start. As if the Bucs needed any more pass rush help. Quarterback Kyle Trask and offensive tackle Robert Hainsey. Coaching changes. Why would they change anything? They won the Super Bowl. Vegas currently has their win total at 12. David, obviously, we'll start with you on this. Is there any reason the Bucs won't repeat in this division?
Injuries. Yeah. Well, repeat. I mean, hopefully they win the division. That's the target, right? Is to win the division. Obviously, they don't care if they win the Super Bowl again. They're going to be perfectly happy whether they win the division or not. Cam Jordan can take another victory lap around the NFC South, and Tom Brady will take another victory lap with Lombardi. But I think it's just injuries. If the team stays healthy, then I think they're by far and away on paper they're the best team in the NFC South, and they proved that over the span of last year, and they just, in the preseason they only look to be picking up where they left off. They've got enough leaders on this team, and guys like Tom Brady who have won throughout their career, know how to keep winning throughout their career to avoid Super Bowl hangover. And then they've also got enough leaders on this team, and guys like Levante David, guys like Mike Evans, who struggled to win, struggled to make the postseason, didn't make the postseason, or in the case of Levante David, made one postseason that was quickly escorted outside of playoff football. So they know what it's like to go through those spurts to keep these young guys hungry. And then they've got enough rookies. I mean, Antoine Winfield Jr. did something that his father was never able to do, and that, of course, is win an NFL championship. So if he can go 2 for 2 in his NFL career for Super Bowls, then obviously he's going to want to do that, and he's got NFL pedigree behind him. So there's every reason in the world for this team to not have a Super Bowl hangover, and that's firmly what everybody expects to happen.
Here, maybe single-handedly the reason for an NFL rule change with his peace sign to Tyreek Hill in the Super Bowl.
Which is the worst rule change of all time.
Yeah, it was great. Tyreek Hill laughed about it. He smiled. He appreciated it. He enjoys the competition. He enjoyed the fact that Antoine Winfield Jr. was taking advantage of the opportunity to rub it in his face a little bit. So, I mean it's part of the competition.
Can we agree, though, that was probably one of the best, like the sweetest and best taunts?
Yeah, it's a classic Super Bowl
in NFL history.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there was not a coaching staff or member of that team that was upset with Antoine Winfield Jr. for doing it. So,
because he didn't and I know this is a little sidebar, but we got to hold on for this for a second. He didn't just flash the deuces. You know what I mean? Like, he posted up in front of him and slammed him in his face. Like, it was so good. All right, moving on. Sorry.
I was obviously cheering for the Chiefs in that one, and I still had to hand it to Winfield Jr. for that one. Like, how can you get mad at that? And the fact that they're going to penalize that now, that's a whole nother discussion, but it's absolutely absurd. Will Mack, how are you feeling about the defending champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Do you think it's just a foregone conclusion short of injuries that they're going to repeat in the South?
In the South, yeah. I mean, I do. I think that they're as safe a bet in my eyes to enter a season as favorites to repeat as probably any team that we've had in a long time. And I think David really hit the right point, which is the hardest thing to do in the NFL is to win a Super Bowl. Winning it twice is almost impossible. I mean, we see so many the Chiefs have in their great run. I mean, they've been one of the most talented teams over the past 5 years, probably in the NFL. They've only got one Super Bowl trophy out of that. I mean, they've got the best quarterback in the NFL and one of the best wide receivers, the best tight end, all of the weapons they have. So hard. Tom Brady is the one person that has been to the mountaintop 7 times now. So if you want, I mean, in that sense, it is like a comp between him and Jordan. You know, it just the ability to win year after year after year and approach it almost like a Nick Saban-like mentality where we won the championship, we're out on the road recruiting the next day. You know, we'll enjoy it, and then we get back to work. If everybody follows Tom Brady's leadership, which why wouldn't they? That's why they're all there, is to follow Tom Brady to another title, then they're not going to have any issues with lapses in competitive mentality. They're not going to have these lulls. I think they're going to be sharp week in and week out. Giovanni Bernard is the perfect addition for this team because it's exactly the type of running back that Tom Brady wants. They are as deep a roster as like I've seen for a team as talented as this team. Usually you end up like the Falcons and you've got 5 really good players and nothing beneath it. I know it's not sustainable, but at least this year that's the case. And by the way, you've got 2 really good coaches on either side of the ball with Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles. So no, there's no reason to believe right now as it stands to bet against Tampa Bay. And I really hope they don't get injured. I hope they don't go through an injury bug because this team is going to be one of the most fun to watch of all time.
So, Big Willie, rather than having you break down the Bucs, because there's not really much else to say at this point, I'm going to cue you up. I saw you put on Twitter, somebody started doing the GOAT Rodgers versus Brady comparison, and you had some choice words.
That's what you want me to talk about? Is how Tom Brady's the unquestioned GOAT?
What else is there to talk about with the Bucs? They literally brought back the entire team.
Isn't it obvious that Tom Brady, what, do we even need to have that discussion? I mean, like, okay.
I'm just trying to fill content right now. This is the Bucs. They returned everybody. They're far and away the best team in this division. They're going to repeat in the division, probably go to the Super Bowl again. I'm trying to find something juicy.
I mean, to David's point, like, it's going to be just a tragedy if some key injury derails this season, right? Because they really do have the opportunity to be one of those like NFL teams that you look back on and you think about and you're like, you know, that's in the Hall of Fame as a team and as a story, right? So I just hope they stay healthy, man. It's going to be a really, really fun thing to watch. I haven't made an NFL game in a long, long time. I have 2 Bucs games that I'm going through this year, just to make sure that if somehow Tom Brady decides to, he ate too much avocado toast the night before and he's got a stomach ache, I want to make sure that I can see him before he retires. So it's gonna be fun though. I mean, I'm pretty sure I did hear somebody say they don't care if they win the Super Bowl. I think I heard that. I think I heard that. They're like, we just want them to win the division, and I'm pretty sure.
I don't think Tom thinks that. I know Tom doesn't think that.
Oh yeah, 100% no. So it's gonna be fun, man. I think there's a lot more interesting people to talk about in the rest of the division though than the Bucs. Everybody knows that that there's gonna be fun. I think the one thing before we do though that I do think is interesting to talk about is there's so many talented people on that roster. Right, and especially now that they're off injuries, right? You got Howard back, Gronk, Brait, Brown, Scotty Miller, Mike Evans, Godwin. How are they all going to stay fed? And that's just the hardest thing, from a fantasy perspective. You want to talk about that? Who do you pick? Right, if the Bucs are if you play DFS, right, and you're gonna play somebody from the Bucs offense, I'm not sure how you pick anybody. It's kind of like the Patriots all over again. And
I will say Evans had 13 touchdowns, mainly almost all exclusively in the red zone. So if there's somebody you're going to target,
most touchdowns happen in the red zone.
No, I know, but it's like he didn't have any of those long. They would get on the 1 yard line, and instead of running the ball, they're throwing slants to Mike Evans. So if there's one player on there, and Antonio Brown, I think he likes to target him in the red zone too. Godwin. It kind of got lost in the shuffle, but that's a nice problem to have when Godwin was one of the top 10 receivers in 2019, and he's lost in the shuffle. So short of Brady getting injured, I don't really see even an injury derailing them.
It's Kyle Trask season. He steps in seamlessly. Moving on.
Jeez.
Moving on.
Let's move on. Yeah, we've said all we can say about the Bucs. Carolina Panthers. Key addition, one in particular, quarterback Sam Darnold, no longer with the Jets, now leading the Carolina Panthers. They brought on edge Hassan Riddick, formerly of the Cardinals, quarterback A.J. Boye, defensive lineman Morgan Fox, wide receiver David Moore, tight end Dan Arnold, and offensive tackle Cameron Irving. Key departures, quarterback Teddy Bridgewater, who is now officially starting in Denver. Running back Mike Davis, who is in Atlanta. Wide receiver Curtis Samuel, now with Washington. Defensive tackle Kawan Short. Safety Trey Boston. Key 2021 draft picks, cornerback J.C. Horn. Wide receiver Terrace Marshall. And offensive tackle Brady Christensen. Coaching changes, also none. Not a lot of coaching changes in this. Atlanta was really the only team that faced that. Vegas has the Panthers win total at 7.5. Not Will McFadden. I'll start with you first. You can lead off the Panthers.
Me? Listen.
CMC is back.
I know, right? The most talented running back in the NFL is back. The question is though, what is this team going to look look like, right? Because when you think about the Panthers and talk hard, it's a lot of questions of maybe. Right? Sam Darnold could come and, they got DJ Moore. They've got Robbie Anderson, who he has, good chemistry with from back in the day. They got McCaffrey. Who knows what that usage is going to be like. So, I don't know. I think everything screams kind of like average, middle of the road performance from this team. But I don't know if that's the case. They could surprise a lot of people with that. I, for one, am very much in Sam Darnold's court here. I really hope that he has a really good chemistry with Moore and with Robbie, and I hope Christian McCaffrey sees the kind of usage that we're used to seeing from him. As you know, because I mostly do fantasy, so I don't know, man. It's certainly a more interesting team to watch now with CMC back and Darnold at the helm than it was being quarterbacked by Teddy Bridgewater with no CMC. Right, that was a very boring squad to watch last year.
I'll go to Falcons, Will, on this one. How are you viewing the Panthers? Do you think that Matt Rule's second season, Sam Darnold at the helm, is there a reason for optimism?
Yeah, I've found a lot more bullish on the Panthers than I think a lot of people. I trust coaching in the NFL, and I just think that Matt Rule and Joe Brady are good offensive coaches. I think that part of what attracts somebody like Joe Brady to a team like Carolina is Christian McCaffrey. It is this unique queen on a chessboard type of player where you can do whatever you want with him. I have to believe that
I'm not sure he'd be a big fan of that nickname. Can we agree?
It's Queen City, right?
If somebody referred you as a
Charlotte,
queen on a chessboard, I don't know what I'd say. But moving
That's the ultimate compliment in the world of chess.
I guess.
Not Will McFadden. But you have to think that a lot of his game plan was probably built on using Christian McCaffrey either as the primary option or as a decoy. When he went out of that offense, I think that we really haven't seen what the true Panthers offense is going to look like because Christian McCaffrey missed all of last year, which means I don't think a lot of NFL defenses have seen that. So I think that there's a little bit of year 2 element of surprise in play with the Panthers. I like that they went all defense last year and that they, or 2 years, last year, 2 years, one of the last two. And I think that those guys are poised to really kind of make a jump. I think Brian Burns is on the verge of becoming a real star in this league. And if you have a star pass rusher with a defensive interior led by Derek Brown, and you've got Yetur Gross-Matos on the other side. I mean, if the defensive line leads,
Yep, we may have lost him. All right, well, we can go over to David while Will comes back. He was just overwhelming us with the Panthers knowledge. So, David, what is your take on Carolina for 2021?
Yeah, they've got a lot of young talent and a lot of potential. I'm not a fan of Sam Darnold. I'm going to be honest with you right now. I don't believe in Sam Darnold. I don't think Sam Darnold has what it takes to lead an NFL offense and franchise by himself. But that being said, Carolina is very quietly building a very good, solid young defense, and I don't know that this year they're going to be ready to take a step into kind of the upper echelon of the NFL or the top half of the NFL. But I agree with Will, and Brian Burns is one of my favorite pass rushers in the NFL. That secondary is starting to come together really nicely, and really they just need to get their linebacking core really kind of solidified. I think they'll do that over the next course of the next year or two, depending on how some of these additions like Hassan Reddick work out for them. If Hassan can come in and hit on some of the potential he had when he came into the NFL, and that's a huge step forward for that Panthers defense, and that gives his coaching staff something to really build off of for next year. For this year, I mean, I will say that I think Sam Darnold is more of a Joe Brady quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater was. So, I mean, to that aspect, and he does have that relationship, like you said, with Robbie Anderson, so you never want to undersell that. Those guys are together for a reason. I feel like this team right now, they're missing a number one wide receiver. Like DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are both at their best, they're high-end number twos, but I don't think either one of them are number ones. Terrace Marshall has number one potential. I think the team needs to figure out where they're going to find a number one receiver, either in the draft next year, in a trade somewhere, or free agency, or they hope the guys like me are wrong and that they have one or two even number one caliber wide receivers on the roster. But until they figure that out, Christian McCaffrey can't do it by himself. He's already hitting the shelf life point of a running back where you really start to get worried, and he's coming off of the big injury. So all those things are gonna be painful, and they're gonna be big influencers of what happens. Because I mean, Christian McCaffrey is the pride of Castle Rock, Colorado. That's where I call home. So I'm a huge CMC fan as well. I just don't think that it's smart to put it all on his shoulders as a running back in his situation. I don't think the Sam Darnold, quite honestly, has the chops to do it.
Well, I mean, if you're going to say that DJ Moore is not a wide receiver one,
yeah,
he's probably the best wide receiver two that I can think of in the NFL.
Yeah, like I said, he's a top end wide receiver two. Yeah,
he's solid. I mean, I think the thing too that they lack is like Dan Arnold is not like a legit tight end. Like, you know what I mean? Like he's functional at best, I guess. So I don't know, man.
He's been having a good camp. They're saying that he's got good rapport with Darnold.
I'm sure he does. Sure. But the point is, like, I don't know. I mean, like, I guess what you have to go off of to say that Sam Darnold is bad is the fact that Sam Darnold has been bad in the NFL. So
he is what he is until he proves otherwise, basically. But coaching matters, and everybody knows Sam Darnold did not have a very strong coaching staff around him.
Look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen, given to the random coaching carousel that is the NFL, should be bad. But he's not because of where he's at, right? So,
absolutely.
And the Gase effect is real. Trust me, I know the Gase effect is real.
Yeah.
Look at Tannehill.
I know.
Tannehill was extremely mediocre. Yeah. And then he goes to Tennessee and he just lights it on fire, right? I mean,
no.
He's high-paid mediocre. Fair enough.
So, intrigue is the word I would use with Carolina.
Fat maybe with Carolina.
Yeah, that's kind of the best way to put it. We don't know. the precedent shows based on his tape, for his 3 years with the Jets, that Darnold will not be much better than an average quarterback, but Teddy Bridgewater was an average quarterback. It's the defense that intrigues me here. I like Brian Burns, obviously Florida State guy. I was high on him coming out of college because I got to see him play a lot. Jeremy Chin, there's a lot of talk about a defensive rookie of the year candidate. There's just a lot to go on here from the defense, and if this offense can be pretty good, they could surprise some people. If CMC does come back healthy, if that Joe Brady offense comes to fruition and Darnold is able to be the guy that fits in that offense better than Bridgewater did last season, I'm not saying they're going to win the division, but they could be at one of those teams that nobody's really paying much attention to that ends up surprising people.
Is Bleav bad now? Is he washed?
Ever since he left Jacksonville, when he was the number 2 next to Ramsey, the two of them, they had a great tandem, but they wanted him to serve more of a number 1 defensive back role in Denver. That didn't really work out. I don't know if there was a team in between Denver and Carolina. Bouye's kind of fallen off the radar.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of like, right, yeah, fair enough.
So we're going to move on to the Falcons now. Unfortunately, we are down to one Will because Will McFadden is having some technical difficulties.
One, Brian. All you need is one.
Apparently, are you a Falcons expert?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then we're going to start with you. Let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. Key additions: running back Mike Davis, formerly of the Carolina Panthers. Cordarrelle Patterson, still making a name for you, still getting a paycheck, still doing his kind of Swiss Army knife thing. Linebacker Brandon Copeland, quarterback Fabian Moreau, formerly of the Raiders, safety Eric Harris. Key departures, biggest one, wide receiver Julio Jones, now with the aforementioned Tannehill in Tennessee. Safety Keanu Neal, who is now a linebacker for the Cowboys, but actually seems to be having a pretty good camp. Followed Dan Quinn to Dallas. Safety Ricardo Allen. Center Alex Mack, now in San Francisco. Running back Todd Gurley, still unemployed. And running back Ito Smith. 2021 draft picks, the key pick for them, of course, is number 4 overall pick, tight end Kyle Pitts out of Florida. Safety Richie Grant and offensive tackle Jalen Mayfield. Now, this is the one team in the division that had a number of coaching changes. So they basically replaced everybody. Head coach Arthur Smith, who was the offensive coordinator in Tennessee, now replaces Dan Quinn. Offensive coordinator Dave Ragone. Arthur Smith will be calling the plays, but Ragone will be the offensive coordinator and pass game coordinator. He is replacing Dirk Cutter. Defensive coordinator Dean Pease came out of retirement, formerly of the Titans as well, is replacing Raheem Morris / Jeff Ulbrich. Vegas has their win total at 7.5, like Carolina. So Mr. Will Southard / respect Sam Darnold is now his name on the in our studio here. Since you're the Falcons expert and you're the only Will we have left on the show, tell us about Atlanta.
Well, see, even though I am the resident Falcons expert on this show, I feel like it'd be better and more fair to you guys if we had a group discussion around the topics of the Atlanta Falcons. So I will grace you with your ability to provide input. So
that feels like a deflection if I ever heard one, but go ahead.
I think when we kicked off the show, you basically had it right? Like obviously Julio's gone. Calvin Ridley is amazing, right? And did well when he had to fill in the number 1 role when Julio wasn't there. I think this, whether or not Kyle Pitts is good, and I think they're going to have to feature him in that offense because otherwise, like the fan base is just going to revolt. You take a guy number 4 overall and you don't make good use of him, right? It's the defense though. It's the pass rush. It's all that. Like the offense is going to figure it out, right? I mean, Mike Davis is a very serviceable running back, arguably one of the best things Atlanta has had in a while, probably, even though that's not saying a ton. Their offense is going to be fine, right? It's where can they stay, in games? Can they hold teams to, a little bit? Like just watching that game last night and probably didn't feature everybody, but Baker Mayfield looked fantastic against, in that preseason game. So, you never know. I mean, that's just one data point, but I really think that's going to be the key for the Falcons is can their defense keep them in games?
David, how are you feeling about Atlanta this season?
I think that's an accurate assessment. They've got a lot of defenders.
You're damn right it is.
They've got a lot of defenders expected to be starters that quite honestly would be backups on a lot of other NFL teams and on a lot of other defenses. My question on the offensive side of the ball is going to be the running game because if they can't get their running game going, and that's what Mike Davis is there for, is to be that bowling ball guy to kind of get the running game going. And then Cordell Patterson, I mean, like you said to me, he's more of a special teams guy, but I think their idea is some body blows with Mike Davis and then some haymakers with Cordero, and then that'll open things up for Ridley and for Kyle Pitts. I wasn't a huge fan of the Kyle Pitts draft pick. To be quite honest with you, I kind of feel like in their situation with a quarterback like Matt Ryan, you're in a situation where you need to get players that are going to help you win now. And even if Kyle Pitts turns out to be the best tight end that ever played in the National Football League, you're talking 3 or 4 years, so he can really be like your number one option on that offense. I feel like Hayden Hurst was a very serviceable starting tight end for them. There's other options. They could have gone out and got a John Bates later on in the NFL draft, but then take a guy with that pick there that either helps Matt Ryan today make a better overall offense, either helps that defense where they have so many holes, or even trade back and collect draft picks. When they drafted Pitts, I quite honestly said if I were Matt Ryan, I'd probably be asking for a trade right now, because this team is not going to get back to the Super Bowl anytime in his career with what's left on it, the way that they're building this roster right now. But it's just year one. You know what I mean? Let's see what gems they find out there. Let's see if Calvin Ridley can be a true number one when you're the number one. It's different when you're filling in for the number one because he's injured off the field, and when you're the legitimate number one guy that a defense has to worry about. So we'll see how he does in that role. Russell Gage, one of the leaders in the league in drops last year, if he can step into that second role. So there's a lot of questions, a lot of potential, kind of like the Carolina Panthers, kind of like the New Orleans Saints as well. There's a lot of potential and a lot of questions that we just have to figure out which ones are going to get answered the appropriate way.
I mean, I went to Florida, right? I freaking love, in an unhealthy way, Kyle Pitts, right? I think the guy is just otherworldly good. And I 100% agree with you.
Do you love Pitts more or Trask more? That's the question.
They're equal. Okay. They're the same human in my eyes. No, listen. But it's that I agree with you. When that pick was made, I was like, I really don't like it. I don't like it for a lot of reasons. Not so much for Kyle, right? I mean, I think that like Matt Ryan and that offense will use him. To your point, I just don't think it's the best use of the Falcons' number 4 draft position to take him. I mean, he would have gone in the top 10 for sure, but not.
Who else do you take there? I mean, so Justin Fields is the obvious choice. No, but do you take?
I mean, Sewell. I mean,
at 4?
Good Lord. I mean, that's the point.
Sewell,
you take anybody, right? You take anybody that Hayden Hurst, like what he said. I mean, tight end at number 4 is a big one, right? That's a huge reach. Even for somebody as probably as good as Kyle's going to be in the NFL.
Yeah, because I mean, the problem with taking a tight end there when you have a guy like Hayden Hurst is if you pull Hayden off the field, then you're losing what Hayden brings. You're adding what Kyle brings on top of it. So maybe there's a little bit of an advantage there, but it's not that significant of an improvement. If you add to your offensive line, then you're giving your running game a better opportunity. You're giving your quarterback more time. If you add to the defense with a cornerback or something like that, then you're adding to their efficiency on the back end, the proficiency there, or a pass rusher, something to be said there. There's nothing wrong necessarily taking talented players, right? Like, and it has nothing to do with Kyle Pitts. It's like you said, Will. It's where the team is in the situation when they take a pick like that one. So you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a few years ago now, where they take Devin White at a position, at a draft spot, number 5 overall, where typically you don't see off-ball linebackers going that high. The reason being that off-ball linebackers just don't have the impact on a defense and an NFL team that you would want a number 5 overall pick to have. And the same thing goes with Kyle Pitts at number 4, a tight end. Even as great as they are, you look at the Travis Kelce's of the world, the George Kittles of the world, they're not out there winning Super Bowls every single year, your top tight ends in the NFL, because they just don't pack that big of an impact and a punch on an NFL team. Well, the Buccaneers took Devin White knowing that they were and they had a roster that was much better than their number 5 overall draft pick, and they had a plan in place to either figure out if Jameis Winston was going to be the guy that they needed him to be, and if he wasn't, they had the plan and they had the resources to go out there and attack the quarterback situation, going after either a Tom Brady or somebody else to come in and bring that team completely together. So when it all works out, that's the reason you see the Buccaneers pulling the trigger on a number 5 overall pick at a position that typically doesn't go that high. The Atlanta Falcons aren't in that situation. The Atlanta Falcons they're not one player away from being a Super Bowl contender. They're multiple players away from being a Super Bowl contender. Now they have 2 of the top 12 to 15 tight ends in the National Football League, and that's amazing and that's great. But at the end of the day, when you're down by 21 points or you're down by 14 points or even up by 14 points and you need to bleed the clock, having Kyle Pitts and Hayden Hurst on your roster versus one of these other guys or these other positions aren't going to help you seal that game.
I think the lack of personnel is the obvious thing here, especially on the defense. The offensive line, one of the weaker in the NFC for sure, but they have weapons, and it's the coaching that I'm intrigued with. I'm intrigued with Arthur Smith. If he brings in that Tennessee offense, installs more play action. Matt Ryan's best season was under a play action type offense under Kyle Shanahan, 2016. I think they'll put up some points. I think that'll be fun to watch. I think that this division is going to be fun to watch in that regard with the quality of the offenses. But Dean Pease is going to have to do the coaching job of his life. The guy loves to manufacture pressure. He loves to call various style blitzes, and they're going to need that because it's the pass rush, which is the biggest question here. They've got Grady Jarrett up the middle, one of the better defensive tackles, especially as a pass rusher. They have Deion Jones, fantastic off-ball linebacker. If A.J. Terrell can make a jump, they might have a little bit to fall back on in the secondary, but there's just so many other pieces. As you mentioned, I think, David, a lot of these players would be backups on other defenses. So if Pease and Smith put it all together from a coaching perspective and get more than the sum of its parts, then this Falcons team could be interesting. I do think they'll put up points, but it's hard to expect much more than that 7.5 win total. So Will McFadden has tried to come back on. It looks like he's having issues with the storm as well. It's affecting a lot of areas in the Southeast. So we're just going to have to run it home, the three of us. We'll start with you, David. Let's talk about your division prediction for the standings top to bottom.
Yeah, so I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the favorite to win the NFC South for every reason we stated already. I do think the Atlanta Falcons are the second best team in the NFC South on paper right now, and I really attribute that to the quarterback. I think that Matt Ryan can work with the weapons they have. I expect the Atlanta Falcons to come out in 12 personnel a lot. I don't know if they're considering themselves a 12 personnel base package. You look at their official depth chart on the team, they do have two tight end slots on their depth chart. So I mean, that would kind of hint that they do consider themselves a 12 personnel offense, which is great because that's how you get Hayden Hurst and Kyle Pitts on the field at the same time. My question really surrounds whether or not they can protect Matt Ryan long enough to take advantage of the weapons that they do have, and if Russell Gage again can step up and be that number 2 wide receiver that they need. If they can, I think the Atlanta Falcons realistically need to come in every game shooting for 30 points in order to expect to win. I really that's how little I think of their defense, I suppose, is how we put it there. But I do think on paper they're the second best team in this division, mainly because of all the turmoil and the question marks surrounding the New Orleans Saints, starting with Jameis Winston and what he can or can't do, Michael Thomas and his dedication to the team still at this point in time, and the holes that they have on defense, especially with the suspended players, and then one of their main starters, Quan Alexander, who I hate to say it at this point in time, but I can't believe that he's going to get through an entire season healthy and unscathed. And once they lose him, that's going to be a major loss on a defense that's already shaken compared to the version they were last year. And then the Carolina Panthers, it all comes down to the quarterback position. I don't believe in Sam Darnold yet. He kind of is who he is until he shows otherwise. Coaching does matter, so I will happily come back on with you guys if you want, Will, to tell me that I was wrong and I should have respected Sam Darnold maybe a little bit more. But Joe Brady, I mean, look, if there's a coach in the NFL outside of like a Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich that can do it, I think that Joe Brady is the guy for the job. So if Sam Darnold isn't successful with the Carolina Panthers, he's just not meant to be an NFL quarterback.
Will,
I'm gonna go. I'm just we're gonna do what I don't want to do, and it's give the Saints more credit than I think. Jameis so far has shown that he is competent in the preseason, right? I mean, LASIK Jameis looks okay.
LASIK Jameis.
I'm just gonna go out there and give the benefit of the doubt.
He looks good against the Jags, like third stringers.
Sure, but I mean, I think a lot of Sean Payton, like the Falcons are just all over the place. I think the Falcons and the Panthers are competing for last in the division. I'm gonna go Bucs, Saints, and if I had to pick, I'm probably gonna say the Panthers and then the Falcons in that order. I don't care how many wins you want to call last in the division; it'll be somewhere around the 6-7 win mark. But I think the Bucs are just gonna absolutely crush it to the point where they're just sitting people towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I think it's not out of the question for the Bucs to lock up this division by like week 13 or something like that. Yeah. I don't see a lot of pushback. I don't have faith in the Saints. I think, like a lot of these teams, there's going to be points scored. They're going to be fun to watch, but way too many questions on the defensive side of the ball. And you don't have an efficient, smart quarterback who is able to offset any defensive deficiencies in Drew Brees. You have a guy who is very volatile, high variance, and there's going to be some games where he's throwing 3 or 4 touchdowns and some games where he's throwing 3 or 4 picks. That's just the Jameis Winston experience, but that is going to cost the Saints some wins, especially when you're going up against a juggernaut like the Bucs. The Panthers, they're the team from this exercise that I came the most intrigued by. They also have a fairly high variance. If this defense is as good as it could be on paper, and if Darnold ends up being a better quarterback than he was under Adam Gase, which is certainly within the realm of possibility, CMC comes back healthy, this could actually be the second best team in the division. I'll go out on a limb. I'd say it'll be close, but I'm going to go ahead and pick the Panthers to finish second. I'll pick the Saints to finish third. And the Falcons, while I do think that Arthur Smith offense will be fun to watch, they've just got too many holes from offensive line to most of their defense. And Dean Pease will manufacture pressure, and they could have some. They could definitely be in contention and be competitive. But I still think they're going to finish fourth in the division again. So I messaged. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know what I was going to say. I had it, and then I don't know.
One interruption just threw you off. Like you can't stay on your thoughts. That's all it takes. Just like a little push, and then you go right off the rails. But what I was going to say is, it looks like that Will McFadden is not going to be able to come back on. I messaged him on Twitter asking for his division prediction. He has not gotten back to me yet, so we'll just have to guess that he would predict the Falcons to win and go 16-1, and the Bucs to crash and burn at 8-9. That sounds fair. That sounds straight up. He's a Falcons reporter. He's gotta have some optimism there. All right.
Wait, no. Here's what I'm gonna say.
Oh, okay.
You know that scene from that? What was that scene from that movie? I think it was 300, where it was not a pleasant scene, and there was a situation happening, and the guy said, "This will not be over quickly. You will not enjoy this." And I picture that's what the Bucs are gonna do to the Saints this year, because if there's one thing that the Bucs, it stings, is how bad they got their ass kicked by the Saints. I think that I think that they're just gonna make it hurt this year, and I'm gonna love every single second of it. You know, wasn't that 300, Brian? Wasn't that what that was?
It sounds like it could be from 300. I've seen that movie a bunch of times, but I can't think of that particular quote.
I think it was 300.
All right, well, that is going to wrap up our division preview series. The next time we do a main NFL episode is going to be our week 1 preview and our season preview show next week, where, as Will said, we're going to actually talk about real football. No more speculation. No more latest news story, who got cut, who got traded, where does Russell Wilson really want to play. No, we're going to say, hey, here are the games, here's what's happening.
And to that point, David, would you agree with me? And I was looking at the, I play a lot of DFS, right? Would you agree with me that a very juicy week 1 DFS matchup is actually the Jacksonville-Houston game? Just think about it. Neither of those teams are going to play any discernible amount of defense whatsoever. Yeah, right? I'm excited. It's like Battle of the Horribles. Oh, speaking of...
look at that. We don't need to wait on Twitter.
Yeah, we just crapped on the Falcons for like 30 minutes. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I guess my microphone was like the reason it wasn't allowing me back in for whatever reason. So hopefully the audio is not too bad now.
No, it's great. We'll have you. You're on. So tell us a little bit about Atlanta, and then give us your division predictions. Came on just in time.
All right, cool. I'll try to make it quick. So for Atlanta, it's really a case of we have no idea what to expect. Smith kind of
we do.
The starters for one series in the last game. Outside of that, it's been watching Felipe Franks and AJ McCarron and Josh Rosen was actually probably like by and large the highlight of this preseason, which tells you all you need to know about the Falcons
Good
preseason.
For Josh.
But I think that any meaningful injuries in this team's season is probably over. I think that the defense has the chance to surprise some people. I know that the pass rush doesn't look like it's there, but some of the guys that they've moved into this edge rushing role seem to have been really performing at camp, and they are underrated pass rushers. Stephen Means and Jacob Tuioti-Mariner, they're not stars in any way, shape, or form. I mean, this isn't a team they're going to have to manufacture pressure, which is what Dean Pease has said they're going to do. And he's one of the best at doing it, so we'll see. Offensively, again, it's such a huge question mark because we just haven't seen any of the starters out there. I think Kyle Pitts looks like the real deal. He's getting a ton of attention in practice. I think Calvin Ridley can hold his own as a number one receiver. But what we're going to get from the run game, how the offensive line is going to play in now this outside zone scheme with all these play actions, it's just something we haven't seen yet, so it's hard to fully predict. There's a chance that this offense really will and can win a lot more of these one-score games than they did last year. I mean, they should have probably been an 8-win team had they not had just the worst football luck in the history, or just the worst football play, however you want to look at it, that we've seen in a long time. So the talent is there. Could this team sneak in as a wild card if they have a really good season? Sure, they've got the talent to do that, but I think if we're looking at it, all things told, it's probably 7, 8, 9. Like I said with the Saints, right around there, because I do think they're not as bad as last season was. I am a believer in Kyle Pitts. I think the defense will be a little bit better, or at least kind of hold out where it was, and then we'll just see how things break. So my division standings, so Tampa obviously 1. I have Carolina 2. I have Atlanta 3 and New Orleans 4.
Okay, yeah, that works.
So Will respects Sam Darnold a little bit more than I do, apparently.
I just think Adam Gase. No, I just hate Adam Gase. And I just think
is there anybody that likes Adam Gase?
So do I.
Maybe his wife. Maybe his wife likes him.
Sam Darnold was kind of the best parts of everybody. He wasn't atrocious. He wasn't Josh Rosen to name somebody who's been the highlight of the Falcons season. He was, at least there were times where it was kind of like, Sam Darnold, maybe you got something there. And to have that while he's working with Adam Gase, I think there's more to work with than maybe we saw out of New York, and I think that he goes into a far better situation.
Well, I'm going to use that as inspiration. So we have a live halftime audio show. If you've never tuned in to our live show, you download the Halftime Sports app every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I said last week that I would do a free giveaway, would do a $10 cash giveaway, and we might end up giving away more if $10 doesn't seem like it's enough in 2021. And there's this code word. You just need to bring the code to our halftime show. And I'm going to make the code Gase Sucks. So there's your code. You want to come to our halftime show and win $10 courtesy of the Pigskin Party podcast, just bring the code Gase Sucks, and we'll make sure to Venmo you, PayPal, whatever. Because, yes, the Gase effect is 100% real, and it would not surprise me in the slightest if Sam Darnold ends up turning into at least a top 12 to 15 quarterback, simply being out of Gase's wing. Will McFadden, sorry, got to be specific. So glad you could make it back on just in time to give us your Falcon thoughts. Why don't you let everybody know once again where they can hear you?
Get back on too. It felt really bad.
We eviscerated the Falcons.
Well, that's good. I'll make sure. I'll make sure to go back and listen. So that's how you got me on the hook here. No, you follow me on Twitter at Will McFadden. Bleav in Falcons, BLEAV is how it's spelled. Anywhere you get your podcast, we have former All-Pro fullback Ovi Mahaley is my co-host for the season, and maybe moving onwards. And so, yeah, that's how I write for the Falcoholic. So those are really the 3 main channels that you can find me.
And David Harrison, thanks for stepping in on short notice. Let everybody know where they can find you, all the different locked-ons you do. Well, I know where I can find you. No one else needs to know where they can find you. So thanks for showing up, at least. You're the only one besides me on this team. No Tommy, no producer Anthony. Thanks as always for listening. This is the last time we will mention we are running 2 DFS leagues, because this time next week we'll be setting the leagues up. We're going to send invites out this week. So we're going to have a free weekly league, so you can jump in, jump out, and there'll be over $50 cash prizes each week. Oh, you've Will Southard, I believe you've ordered additional hats. Am I right?
I may have ordered additional hats.
Okay.
The mother load of hats, if you will, to just account for every single scenario. So we can't tell you all what they are right now, even though they're behind me. But we got stuff for juicy takes. We got stuff for spicy takes. We got stuff for hills that I'm gonna die on. And there's one more that I don't know what the last one was, but it's a good hat for another appropriately named take.
So you can win cash prizes and you can win one of Will's silly hats. Just check out, email us at pigskinpartypodcast@gmail.com or message us on Twitter, official PPPod. We also are running a season-long league in DFS, so that'll just be a $25 entry fee, but there'll be weekly cash prizes as well as prizes at the end. Just let us know if you're interested. We've got a number of people who are going to be joining that. Thanks as always for listening. For the flavor of the week, we'll try to get Tommy back on there because we're going to do our all PP Pro defense. So we're at least going to have to wait for him to come back. Don't forget to continue leaving us 5-star reviews. Check us out on social media. Sign up for Legit Football. All the good stuff. Football is coming up. Thanks for listening. And stick around for the flavor of the week.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Pigskin Party Podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort. We'll catch you in the next Pigskin Party.